All right, so here we are with our first episode of Detective TeddyMD attempts to solve Lord Edgware Dies by Dame Agatha Christie. Now, Lord Edgware Dies is one of Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot novels. Now, Hercule Poirot is probably her most famous creation, maybe close with Miss Marple. And he is a Belgian detective, very good at finding the identity of the killer using his little gray cells. And joined with him in this particular novel is Captain Hastings, who is kind of like a less intelligent version of Dr. Watson. Okay, and so now we'll introduce the other players in this mystery. So of course, with the title Lord Edgware Dies, the murder victim is going to be Lord Edgware, or George Alfred St. Vincent March, 4th Baron Edgware. And he's described as a cold and cruel man, not very likable at all. He's been married twice. His first wife was several years ago, and she left 3 months after giving birth to their daughter Geraldine. And Geraldine's about in her early 20s, and the First Lady Edgware died in Europe several years prior to the events of this novel. And then he remarried 3 years prior to the events of the novel to the former Jane Wilkinson, an American Hollywood actress. And so she had given up her career as a Hollywood actress to come to England to be Lady Edgware. But she left him 18 months after their marriage and returned to Hollywood and resuming her career. And she cites that he was cruel and that she was afraid of him. And there are kind of references to Lord Edgware potentially being a little bit sadistic. And so we start the novel with Poirot, Captain Hastings, and Jane Wilkinson being at a performance of another American actress named Carlotta Adams. And now Carlotta Adams is known for her impressions, and she ends her act with an impression of Jane Wilkinson that is dead on. So after the performance, Jane Wilkinson invites Poirot, Hastings, and Carlotta Adams to a party at her hotel. So also in attendance at this party is Brian Martin, who is another American Hollywood actor. And he has starred in several films with Carlotta Adams. And it seems like maybe he has some type of romantic past with her, or has some type of romantic interest in her, and also maybe some resentment of her. And he mentions that she is very amoral, and that she will do whatever she feels she needs to do to get what she wants, and with very little consideration for how it will affect other people. So later in the party, Jane approaches Poirot and asks for his help in getting rid of her husband. And she clarifies by saying that she wants him to persuade her husband to grant her divorce so that she can remarry. She wants to marry the Duke of Merton. And Lord Edgware has been refusing to grant her divorce. And she mentions that she feels that her life would just be easy if he were to just die, and jokes about going over to his house in a taxi and killing him herself. But then she does clarify that she's joking, of course. But several people in the party hear this and are a little startled. And Carlotta Adams is also there, and she has a guest with her. And she kind of seems not to approve of Jane Wilkinson, and also mentions that she thinks that Lord Edgware is very cruel and unkind, and she doesn't seem to like him either. So there's also some gossip about Lord Edgware's nephew, Captain Ronald Marsh, who is next in line to be Lord Edgware when Lord Edgware dies. And he's described as a ne'er-do-well who tends to get into a lot of debt. And he had left Lord Edgware's home a few months prior to his marrying Jane Wilkinson due to a dispute over money. He was asking for some money to pay back some loans that he had owed outside, and Lord Edgware had refused. So they've been estranged ever since then for the past 3 years. So the next day, Poirot and Hastings go over to Lord Edgware's house and ask him to grant Jane Wilkinson a divorce. And to their surprise, Lord Edgware says that he's already decided to to grant her a divorce, and that he had written to her in Hollywood saying that he would grant her a divorce. And Poirot is really surprised to hear this, and so of course we're led to think a few things. One, is Lord Edgware lying? He never sent this letter saying that he was going to grant her a divorce. Two, did Jane Wilkinson lie about receiving this letter? With both of those potential options, it doesn't really seem to make sense. However, the third option is that someone else got the letter and absconded with it to prevent Jane Wilkinson from remarrying. And we can maybe think that, there's somebody, maybe someone in the aristocracy that doesn't want her to marry the Duke of Merton. And also there's Brian Martin, who seems to potentially be carrying some type of romantic torch for Lady Edgware, Jane Wilkinson. As they're leaving, so they meet his Lord Edgware's butler, who is a very handsome Greek god-appearing man who actually bears a strong resemblance to Brian Martin. And then they also see a mousy, shy young lady who they assume is Lord Edgware's daughter, Geraldine. So he then goes over to tell Jane Wilkinson that Lord Edgware will be granting her a divorce. And she is ecstatic to hear this and kind of goes off in her little romantic dream world, thinking about the life that she's going to live with the Duke of Merton when he returns from his trip to Paris. She does say that she had lied to Lord Edgware about wanting to marry an actor because she didn't want him to know that she was going to be marrying another aristocrat that outranked him, as the Duke of Merton is a duke and Lord Edgware is a baron. So Poirot returns home and gets a visit from Brian Martin, who informs him that he is concerned about being stalked. Throughout his travels across the United States, as well as since coming to England, he's always seeing this man with a gold tooth in various disguises. So he's concerned about that. He wants Poirot to get to the bottom of it. And he also, again, warns Poirot that he's worried about Jane Wilkinson actually acting on her threat to go and kill Lord Edgware because he's standing in the way of what she wants. So he's a little surprised to hear that that Lord Edgware has decided or agreed to grant her a divorce. So the next day, Lord Edgware is found dead with a knife wound to the base of his skull. So now it's time for me to log in my guess after the end of Act 1. And so at this point, we've heard a lot of people talking about Carlotta Adams and her impressions. And so and the fact that she's done an impression of Jane Wilkinson that other people have applauded. So I do think that that's going to come into play. I think that she is going to be at the scene of the crime as Jane Wilkinson, and either she's going to have killed him herself. I think that's not as likely. We know that she doesn't really like Lord Edgware, and she doesn't really like Jane Wilkinson either. But we haven't really been provided a strong motive as to why. I mean, we could get one later, but at this point, I don't see it. But we do have two other people that could potentially hire her to do this, and that is Brian Martin, who, as I said, I believe that he had some type of romantic interest or some type of romantic past with Jane Wilkinson and feels jilted. So I could see him trying to frame her for murder, so to get her out of the way, to get revenge on her. And there's also Captain Ronald Marsh, who is the next in line to be Lord Edgware. So we know that he is in a lot of financial difficulties, and inheriting that title and the estate and money that come with it, that could go a long way in alleviating some of those debts. So at this point, I think it's probably one of those two, hiring Carlotta Adams to be at the scene of the crime, and one of them is going to commit the murder. So we'll see when we go into Act 2.